I'm back! Hi everyone, I'm Jay Monet and welcome to my channel. I know it's been a while and that's because I had to move, but now I'm settled in and I'm ready to get filming again. Today I'll be doing my quarterly wrap-up. I've decided that since I don't know how many books I'll be reading each month, I'll do a quarterly wrap-up instead of a monthly wrap-up. For the first 3 months of the year, I finished a total of 10 books. I won't be doing these books in order, but I will be telling you my ratings and quick thoughts on each book. If you want an in-depth video of any of the books I mentioned in this video, comment down below what book you want me to discuss. I'll already be having separate videos for each Toni Morrison book, and I'll mention the other books that I will have a video on. If there are any other books that I don't mention a separate video for, then comment them down below. Let's get started. So the first book I'll be talking about is The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. As you all know from previous videos, Toni Morrison is my favorite author, and The Bluest Eye is the first Toni Morrison book that I've ever read. During my senior year of high school, my AP Lit teacher had us read The Bluest Eye and told us how it was a banned book. I got really intrigued by the fact that we were allowed to read a banned book in this class, and then when I found out that the author was a black woman, I got even more excited. And The Bluest Eye became my favorite Toni Morrison book at the time, and it changes, my favorite one changes as I mentioned before. But of course, The Bluest Eye got a 5 out of 5 stars for me. And for those of you who don't know, The Bluest Eye is, I don't really want to say it's a coming of age story. The characters are children. They're like late, I want to say they're late elementary school age. They're not teenagers, and they do go through a lot of obstacles in their life during this book. Like I said before, I'll do a separate video on The Bluest Eye, so I'm not going to go into like very in-depth detail for this video. But the three main characters are little girls in Ohio, and they deal with some serious topics such as abuse, colorism, SA. There are some trigger warnings for this story and other Toni Morrison books as well, and if you are kind of hesitant about reading the book, I would say to look up the trigger warnings. But yeah, I gave it a 5 out of 5. I will always have this as a 5 out of 5 book for me. It's a life-changing book, honestly. The second Toni Morrison book I read was Sula, and that's her second novel. Bluest Eye was her first published novel. Sula takes place in Medallion, Ohio, and it's about these two friends, Nell and Sula. And the book is split into two parts. The first part talks about Nell and Sula as they grew up when they were kids, and then the second part is when they're adults and they meet each other again after Nell gets married, like years after Nell gets married. That was the last time that they saw each other before they were adults. And I gave this book, I want to say, 4.5 stars. Let me check. I gave Sula 4 stars. Like I said, I'll go in depth in another video about my thoughts and go on the background of the story, summarize and all of that, but it is one of the better Toni Morrison books. It's not my absolute favorite, and it usually isn't one of my like top favorite books of hers, but it's also a very, very good story. The next book I'll be talking about is Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng. Many of you know that Little Fires Everywhere is a TV show, a mini-series on Hulu, and that's the reason why I wanted to read the book. I am still doing the adaptation challenge, so this book works for the book to TV adaptation, and I think, well, no, let me not say that, because I am one of those the book is always better people, but I would say the book and the show are neck and neck. The book is so good. There's only like a few things that were different between the book and the show, but the show is so incredibly accurate, and I think that the book and the show are like tied for me. I can't determine which one is better. But if you watch the show, then the book is pretty accurate. Then that's all I'm gonna say about that. But that's why it's a 5-star read for me. I really enjoyed the show, and I really enjoyed the book as well. The next book I'll be talking about is The Haunting of Gillespie House by Darcy Coates. Darcy Coates is an author that I recently started reading over the last few months, and she's turning into an autobi author for me. I really like her stories. She writes horror, mostly gothic horror, which this book is an example of. We have a young woman named Elle, and she's tasked with watching over the Gillespie mansion for a month while the two owners, a married couple, go on this sort of retreat so they can help their marriage out. And throughout the book, Elle tries to figure out what's going on with the house, why there's noises, why she's having these dreams, and then she discovers how to deal with the haunts and how to help the spirits that laid to rest. And it was a four-star read for me. Yeah, it was a 4-star read for me. It was pretty quick. It was a quick read for me. I wish it was a little longer, and I wish there was more. I wish the story had a little bit more. There is some missing pieces, but overall it was a really good story. I had a lot of 4-star reads during this quarter, but that's okay. The next book that I had that was also a 4-star was Luster, a novel by Raven Leilani. This book has been on my reading list for months, and then it was discussed by my short fiction professor during my winter quarter during class, and I was like, whatever, I might as well just buy it now. So I did buy it, and I did enjoy it. This book is about Edie, a young black woman who's in publishing, and she has this relationship, the secret relationship with a married man, and it's also consensual, and the wife also knows about the relationship. And she goes through a lot over time. She loses her job. She also hates the job, but at the same time she needs the job in order to survive. And she ends up having to live with the guy she's having a relationship with, and she ends up having to kind of be a mentor to their young daughter, who is at the time she was, I can't remember if she was fully adopted yet or if she was still a foster child, but she was a young black girl, and Edie has to like maintain a relationship with her while dealing with how to not get kicked out of the house. And so she's like in a tricky situation, and throughout the story there's like bits and pieces about her family and how that has affected her, but I wish there's a little bit more of that to explain her passiveness sometimes. I'm actually going to have a separate video on Luster to really explain my thoughts and why I gave it a 4 and not anything higher. Speaking of my short story class, we had to read this collection. It was Best American Short Stories of 2021, and Jessamine Ward was the editor. For me, at the beginning it was going pretty well. There were some stories I was like, absolutely not, but then there were some stories that I enjoyed. I think maybe like 2/3 of the way, or maybe half of the way, it started going downhill for me. So the collection, it wasn't great. Honestly, the collection didn't really make sense to me. Some of the stories worked together, some didn't. Some I was confused as to why they were included in the first place. And I know that some people in my class and the professor even thought the same thing, but I don't remember if I rated it, the collection. Yeah, I didn't give it a rating. I think it's weird to kind of give a rating for an anthology, but it's not the best. Like I said, there are some good stories in it, but not all of them. The next book I'll be talking about is Speak by Laurie Halse Anderson. This book apparently during the time it came out, it was very controversial. If it came out now, it probably wouldn't have been. I think for the time, it would have probably been a higher rating for me than it is now. Right now, I gave it, when I read it, because it's my first time reading it, I gave it a 3 stars out of 5. I feel like 1, with my age, and 2, there are better stories, honestly, that came out since then to really dive deep on the topic. I'll also have a separate video about Speak, but for those of you who don't know, it's about SA of a teenage girl before she was entering high school, and how she dealt with that during her first year of high school, how it really affected her grades, her home life, her platonic relationships, all of that, and how it affected her at school as well. So the rest of the books that I read during the first quarter of 2022, I no longer own because I figured I'll never read them again. There's no point in keeping them if I wasn't going to read them again. Some of them are actually 3 or 4 stars, but sometimes a 3 or 4 star book is not good enough to keep. Sometimes it is good enough to keep for me, but these books I actually got rid of. So one of the 3 star reads was Lakewood by Megan Giddings. It had an amazing premise, but the execution wasn't there. I'll probably make a separate video on this one as well. But Lakewood, the premise of Lakewood is that there is a secret experimentation run by the government, and volunteers were sent away to Lakewood, and it's like this secret community. Well, the community is not really secret, but the experiment was a secret, and everyone involved wasn't supposed to talk about it to anyone. No one's supposed to know what's going on unless you're part of the experiment. The main character decided to do the experiment because her mother had a weird illness that led to many medical bills that need to be paid for, and she had no other way of being able to pay for her mother's medical bills. And she finds out that all of the participants in the study are people of color, and you know, that's when you think, oh, this is gonna be a really good story, it's gonna really pack a punch, but then it didn't, especially at the end. I felt like the writer gave up on the story maybe 2/3 of the way, and especially at the end. But like I said, I'll make a separate video on that. The next book I actually still own, but I haven't decided yet if I'm going to get rid of it or if I'm going to read the next book, which actually just came out. And it's also a Darcy Coates book, and it's called House of Shadows. I gave it a 3 stars as well. It was not what I expected. The premise kind of reminded me of The Death of Jane Loris, which is also a book that really disappointed me. And that book is also in the video eventually. But The House of Shadows had the main character decide to marry a man that she met one time in order to save the livelihood of her family, because her dad ended up going broke. And so she's brought to the house that her new husband lives in, and it's haunted, of course. It's a gothic horror as well. She didn't really know that, like I said, she didn't really know that man, and she instantly fell in love with him. And the way that she fell in love with him was odd. It was after he revealed this weird secret about the house. And it made no sense. It was weird. Like I said, this is a book with a sequel that I don't know if I'm going to read, and I don't know if I'm going to keep this book. But ultimately, the story was good until it wasn't, and then it was good again, and then it wasn't. So I don't know if I'm going to continue with this series. But yeah, that's why I give it 3 stars. The final book I'll be talking about is also another book that I do not own anymore, and this might be a little controversial. The book that I read was Verity by Colleen Hoover. It was the first Colleen Hoover book I've ever read, and it's probably gonna be the only one that I'll ever read. I gave this one a 4. Originally I gave it a 5-star rating, and then I dropped it to a 4, 4.5, 4. A 4 after I started really thinking about it. And for those of you who don't know, a lot of people already know about this one, but Verity is about a writer, a published author who has to finish the series of Verity, who is also a writer, but she was in a car accident and she couldn't finish the series, so she goes to live in the house, and all these things happen between the writer, between the main character and Verity's husband. And she also thinks that Verity isn't actually in a coma. And when I was like, this is a really, really good book. It was juicy. It kept me off my toes a little bit. And it was Colleen's first thriller, but you could also tell that she's a romance writer, and that's when I started thinking about it more, that's what made me drop the score. And now I'm thinking about making it even lower than a 4, because the romance part was taking over a lot, like way too much, and at times it seems like Colleen Hoover forgot that she was writing a thriller, because so much smut, so much unnecessary smut was written into the book, and it's like, wrong genre, sis. But yeah, I'm starting to think I'm going to drop the score to 3 stars, because that really took a lot away from the story. At times I would just like want to skip through all that smut part, because it really added nothing to the story. So that was my quarterly wrap up. Like I said, if there's any other books you want a full in-depth review on, comment them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.